All right, welcome to this week's episode of our show, True Data Ops. I'm your host, Kent Graziano, the Data Warrior. Each week, we bring you a podcast covering all things data ops with the people that are making data ops what it is today. Our guest today, my special guest and longtime friend, analyst, author, consultant, and thought leader, Mike Ferguson. He's the owner, CEO, and head of research of Intelligent Business Strategies. Well, welcome to the show, Mike. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Kent. Real pleasure to be here. Great to see you.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've gotten to catch up with all the things that have happened in the last couple of years. So looking
Sure
forward
has.
to having our discussion. I think the last time we talked was about data ops. So this will be kind of, we'll dive into it a little more here. For
Okay.
the folks who are listening today that might not be familiar with you and your body of work, would you mind giving us a little bit of your background in data management?
Sure. Pretty well all my life, really, professional career, over 40 years now. Started out just as a normal database administrator, but very early on in my career, I had a massive opportunity to co-found a company with a Turing Award winner and a very well-known person in database. So I've co-founded a company called Cod and Date with Dr. Edgar F. Cod, who is, of course, the inventor of the relational model. And the other person was Chris Date, who wrote all the books on Introduction to Database. And if you did computer science degree, I guess most folks have probably had that text at some point. So I was there for a number of years, and of course that was pre-internet days, believe it or not. So
Yeah.
when we went around talking about the relational model and stuff like that, we were playing to audiences of thousands because you had to physically turn up at things in order to find out about these kind of new areas of technology. So yeah, I stayed there. Then I got the opportunity. Got I guess approached by a recruiter and headhunted to join a startup in what was then Los Angeles, to become a chief architect there. And that startup was Teradata. So I moved to Teradata at a very early stage, I guess around about late 1989 kind of time frame. Um, and I was there until about 1993. So NCR bought Teradata in 1991,
Mm-hmm.
and I think spun it out again in 2008. But I stayed, I guess, until about 1993, and then I guess geographically at that time, it's a long time ago now, 30 years, right? So I was probably in the wrong place on the west coast of the U.S. I probably needed to be like 500 miles north of there,
North, yes.
rather than being in Los Angeles. And of course, NCR were in the process of moving Teradata down to San Diego. So I decided to move the family back to Europe and stay in Europe. And so I went and joined my old friend. A guy called Colin White, who's retired now. Colin asked me to come and join him, and so I set up a company with Colin, and I guess we amicably parted company. I guess about 20 years ago now, probably about 10 years in. So, and then yeah, so I've been an independent analyst and consultant in data management and analytics for the last 30 years. Working for myself. Well, initially the first 10 years with Colin, but yeah, last 20 on my own, and of course working well primarily in Europe. I live in Europe, live in the UK, but I get to the US a lot. Pre-pandemic, it was probably 8 or 9 times a year, so it
Yeah.
felt like going every month almost. These days, less than that, but yeah, I still starting to travel a bit more now. Now that things are opened up a bit more, but yeah, still kicking and screaming in data management and analytics. But I've been there pretty well all my career, really.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. You're one of the pioneers. That you got the full breadth of the history and development of relational technology from working with EF Cod and CJ Date, who basically, Cod invented. I remember reading CJ's book myself early in my career. It was the first one that I could actually understand that was talking about relational algebra and set theory, that it was actually very readable compared to all the other white papers trying to understand what this whole relation thing is as I was getting into it early in my career. So
Yeah,
you had the
uh,
benefit
it, it was
of working with those guys and then
yeah, it was
evolving.
an honor. In all honesty, I mean, it was an honor, and I learned so much, But I have to say, going to Teradata as well, I learned huge amounts there too. Particularly with business, big business customers, just doing things at that time, pretty groundbreaking things with data, to really drive their business value. But yeah, I mean, it was an incredible time, an incredible era. In all honesty, I mean, when I was with Dr. Cod and Chris. And at the beginning, in a way, of the relational era, when I set
Really, yeah.
the company up with them, like relational was the new game in town, and so there was kind of a craze around that, much like there is, I guess, around DataOps these days. But as if I look back on my career, yeah, it's been I've been very very lucky to have worked with such incredibly talented people throughout, and even at the time when I was there, I got the chance to go meet with people in very talented people in lots of different vendors, working on database research and whatnot, and it was yeah, it was a fabulous time.
Yeah, I mean, you've really gotten to go through, I'll say, the entire evolution of our industry from the beginnings of relational, to, working with Teradata early on, which was our movement into this concept of data warehousing, which is now turned into analytics, advanced analytics, machine learning, AI, all of that. And then the most recent thing that you and I had collaborated on was this idea of true data ops. And for our audience, Mike is one of the co-authors of the True Data Ops concepts at TrueDataOps.org, and a co-author with us on the Data Ops for Dummies book. So obviously, that's the conversation I want to have with you now. Is with all of that background, from your perspective, what is data ops? Where does it now fit in with what we do with data and in the modern era? Cloud based and all of that, and what's the value of it? What is it really? Because everybody's like, what is data ops? What does that really mean?
Well, for me, it's a way to accelerate what we're doing, and componentize it. To kind of get beyond. Let's say when I started building ETL pipelines, for example, 30 odd years ago, I was kind of sitting there on my own, kind of figuring all this stuff out. And I think, we've gone through, the era of monolithic application building, and we went into microservices and collaborative development and being able to do sprints and all these kinds of things that were happening in software development. And I think the whole DevOps era, tried to automate as much of that as possible and then push those practices into the world of data engineering and analytics. And I guess for me at least, the first people to adopt that weren't the traditional data warehouses housing folks. They were data scientists, because data scientists were already writing code, and whether that be Python or R or whatever, they were writing it, and therefore they were getting used to the kind of sort of GitHub kind of collaborative development approaches. And I think the big hurdle, if you like, getting into, let's call it, traditional data warehousing professionals and whatnot, was that they weren't exposed to that kind of software development practice emerging, and so it had this kind of learning curve that they had to try and get over, to get their brain around how does this thing work. And
Very
Uh,
similar to what happened with Agile when Agile made its way into
uh,
the data world in the early
Absolutely,
2000s, right?
absolutely. But I think basically what it's done is try to increase the automation, shorten the time to build, if you like, and deploy or test and deploy. But at the same time, um, rather than have these kind of massive impacts when something goes wrong, having kind of rippled through all the way through, a flow. Like it always reminds me in early days of data warehousing, somebody changed the schema of a data source and it would go all the way through. Your ETL jobs, your data models, all the way onto the data marts, all the way to the reports, just like a whiplash. It was just well, and so I think the idea of moving towards component-based development, is very similar to the sort of microservices era, where you can make changes to business logic associated with an application without kind of causing a catastrophic impact all the way around it. And I think what it's doing is data ops is introducing that into the world of building analytical systems and analytical models. And so component-based development, I think, is the outcome, if you like, of adopting data ops with increased automation. Um, and I would hope that, or I think the big challenge for teams that haven't adopted that yet is is to learn how to go from a finite set of people towards collaborative development and really coordinate that. But I think the best way to do it, quite honestly, is learn from software development within the organizations that data professionals are already working, because a lot of those folks kind of do that for their day job all day long. I mean, they're already doing that in software development, and so, or in application development. And so, kind of bringing those practices into the data team is more of a case of learning off of your colleagues rather than necessarily having to go out and recruit expertise there. I mean, I think there's a lot of expertise within a lot of companies, but not in the data and analytics teams initially, more in the application development teams. So to me, I think data ops is about collaborative development. It's about um, the ability to coordinate and automate testing and deployment, um, and therefore shorten the time to value, if you like, by
Right. Yeah.
shortening the length of time to to deliver this. And I think techniques or new initiatives like data mesh and whatnot are kind of playing into that, with the emergence of data products and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, I still think some of the practices of, let's say, traditional data engineering are still can still be applied in a data ops world. It's just that rather than it being one person trying to do all this stuff, we're now into a much more coordinated, collaborative development environment where we can speed it up and shorten the time.
Yeah, and I think that's was obviously one of the goals of Agile when people started thinking of like 2 week sprints, and the measure of success was how quickly could you put working software into production that solved a business problem. And so we've moved that over into the data world. It's like, how quickly can we get data or information really in the hands of business so that they can be data driven, right?
Yeah,
And the speed at which we're moving today is just incredible. I mean, and you've seen it from the beginning to now. It's not only the volume of data and how much data is available, and we're talking zettabytes now of data globally, but the speed. And so that challenge, like you said, is harnessing these techniques that have evolved in the DevOps world and software development. And Agile was the same way. It developed really in the software world first, and then kind of moved into the data world. For organizations, and I saw this when I was at Snowflake, there was because to a certain extent it's gotten easier, with the cloud, to get access to data and do things. There are companies that are like almost completely they're cloud based, and they may be net new companies, net new industries, net new niches that they actually haven't done software development, because now it's just so easy for them to spin things up and get going. They're using SaaS applications, they're using Salesforce and other online CRMs, but they got to do the analytics, and so they don't have that background in the software development at all, right? This is completely new to them. What would your advice be for companies like that are really, I'll say they're modern cloud-based companies. They're running off of SaaS applications, but they desperately need to get into effectively using all of that data, whether it's for machine learning, data science, advanced analytics, to become data driven. How did they get to this place with data ops when they don't have the background in software development?
That's a great question. I mean, and in a way, it's a challenging question, because I think the one thing I've seen a lot recently is a lot of people are grabbing technologies and really wanting to jump on all of this bandwagon, but getting themselves into kind of Wild West situation, a kind of very chaotic, sporadic development going on, and very little sort of sharing. I mean, I kind of think the whole idea is here to encourage collaborative development. I think is to try to think about how do you take complexity away. And by what I mean by that is, how do you standardize things so people don't have to juggle with all kinds of additional complexities that they don't necessarily need to do. And so for me, I think the whole idea about standardization is to kind of remove friction, to avoid unnecessary complexity, to try and establish consistent approaches to building pipelines and data products, for example, in a data mesh, and facilitate what I would call more like a plug and play kind of sharing. So I kind of think that there's a lot of things you can do. I mean, clearly in terms of standardization, I would be trying to use standardization to remove complexity. For example, if whoever's using cloud, to get a kind of common organization of managing data and the sort of storage layouts. I mean, trying to standardize on tooling so that if you're going to start sharing components, I'm kind of not dealing with lack of integration problems between tools, because they,
Yes.
because if you're going to put those, if you're just going to go out and buy tools all over the place and they're not going to integrate, you're going to run into these roadblocks, and so therefore stifling the development of data ops, because you can't easily collaborate and share because things are not working together. I think templates and libraries and these kinds of things. Also, looking out for cognitive services. If I've got things like, I don't know, voice data and I need to convert it to text, well, I just need a standard service to do that. If I'm going to, validate some address data, I want a standard service to do that. I don't want 20 different teams around the organization trying to bring all of
Exactly.
that. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
I want these common components that, really make a difference, and I need version control around those things, and all of that, and so I think as well, I would want to create a kind of community sort of sharing, inside the enterprise kind of, which I think is kind of critical to success. But yeah, for me, I would want to look to try and standardize, try and facilitate, templates and libraries that you can share, and the tools, and like if I need to connect to unload up a file, why do I have to figure out how to go and do that? There should be a standard component to just do that, and say, well, if it's this kind of file, these kind of things should be parameterized almost, and if I'm needing to mask data. Well, there should be a standard service to go do that. I mean, there's a number of these, I think, components that companies can build, and in a way, I think IT, given that we're now got many more people outside of traditional centralized IT environments now getting involved in this whole data ops world, then I think the job of centralized IT is to empower them.
Yes.
It's to
Yeah.
upskill them, right? And it's to take complexity away from them and give them this kind of common services that people can go, oh, cool, I don't have to figure that out. Here's one's already made kind of deal. And so I think that if we can get to that, I mean, it reminds me of when I look at data modeling, of which you're one of the most experienced people on this planet. I still look at it and I think, well, we're moving into a world of, rather than a monolithic data model, could I have data model components which are semantically linked? I can just kind of like say,
Yeah.
okay, I need that one and that one and that one, snap them together. And so we're getting into this world of breaking pipelines apart into components, wanting to speed it up by giving people standardized services to do certain things, and ultimately building a number of reusable things. So for me, the outcome, if you like, of data ops is almost that we're going from we're going into a world of assembling stuff, much of which may be already made, and sort of standing on the shoulders of people who went before you, rather than constantly going back to zero and having to build everything from scratch
Right.
again.
Yeah. And I think you're hitting on one of the 7 pillars of true data ops, which is the self-service and collaborative nature of a data ops environment. Um,
Yes.
and exactly for these reasons, to be able to do
Yeah, and
that,
and
to
and I
deliver
think it
value without reinventing the wheel every time.
right, and I think that improves efficiency. It reduces implementation costs. It reduces total cost of ownership. Gives you more reliability, lower maintenance costs, because these things have been tested a gazillion times. People using them all over, and they're reusing them everywhere else. And so, when you pick up these kind of things, they're tested, they're, and so the net result is that, over time, we should be getting progressively faster
Right.
because more and more.
And I think the answer though is not just purely technology. I think that's part of what you've pointed out here, is that we can have all the technology in the world. In fact, we can have too much technology if each team is like picking and choosing which technology they use. But we've got to have some agreement around the processes and the standards, and then, like you said, upskilling the people to take advantage of all of that.
You're quite right. I mean, in my opinion, actually, the human organizational element of this is just as important as the technology. If you can get the organization of this thing right, it's critically important. When, as I start to see more and more distributed development going on around the organization, I'm kind of thinking like, well, where's the program office? I mean, like, if I need to come up to climb a ladder and look down on this thing, like, where do I go to do that? Is there somebody that can kind of tell me what's going on, who's building what, and is there stuff that's shareable out there that you need some kind of coordination, and that's
Yes.
nothing to do with technology. It's a human thing, right? I mean, it's an organizational thing.
Yeah, one of the things I've advocated for, and some of the data ops customers like Roche have implemented, is the central IT team really becomes a center of excellence, right? And
Yes.
they can trial, if there's new technology, they figure out, will this help the organization and the different teams, and what standards should we use? What data modeling tool should we use? Uh, what data pipeline tool should we use? But also still making sure that there's a centralized Git repository, right? And that people don't, like you say,
Yeah.
have to go figure that out for themselves. And that can be kind of I see that, and it sounds like you agree with this, the evolving role of a central IT department is like, we don't have to need to get rid of central IT, but we need
No.
to eliminate them from being a bottleneck and make them an enabler. And the way to do that is kind of, they become that center of excellence to set the
And
standards
and
and train
speaking
people.
of enablers, I would have to say, I really like back in September when I was chairing, I chair Big Data London, as you know. I was listening to Karthik Ravindran at Microsoft, the general manager of Microsoft, who was over speaking, and he came up with a great term which I really liked, which was center of enablement, not
Yeah,
center of excellence.
center
And
of
and
enablement.
and I like that idea. I really like that idea because um, it's even the perception out in the business units. When you say center of excellence, it's almost like IT setting itself up to be, we're the guys. You must come and talk to us. Where center of enablement is, no, we're here to help you, and
Yeah,
and it's just a change of a one word, but the perception in the business, I think, is quite you know significant, and I like that. As you say, it's exactly what IT should be doing. They should be enabling, which is putting all of these things in place and saying, if you want to go do this, well, we've got all this stuff already in place for you, help you out, make you more productive. We've taken away the complexity or hidden it or whatever from you, and so you don't have to. You know what I mean? And in order to kind of try and, if you like,
yeah,
oil those wheels and make it run, hit the ground running, rather than running into all kinds of technical barriers along the way because they're trying to figure everything out themselves independently. So I absolutely I think that central IT has a massive role to play, and its role is to enable and upskill and get them to adopt best practices and say you don't have to reinvent this because we got all these kind of capabilities here that you can go use, and I think these kind of things all help shorten the time, reduce the costs, both in terms of development time, development costs, but also maintenance. I mean, we all know over time maintenance becomes a real challenge, and the
yeah,
what we've learned from software development is that maintenance can be pretty rapid if you get this right, and you can get lots of new builds and new deployments, by adopting these kind of practices. And I think that's what has to happen here. It is about coordination, and it is about organization. And I think the more you put into that, the slicker the development, the more rapid it becomes, and it then becomes like almost a habit. I mean, it just ingrains itself into the organization as people start to adopt that and get better and better at it.
yeah, yeah. No, exactly. I like that term, the center of enablement. I think you're right, because, as we said, it's, this is people, processes, and technology, and so there's people involved, and
Yes.
that idea of enablement versus IT being, the center of excellence is probably, it's a nuance, but it's an important nuance if we're going to really collaborate well with the business and different teams across the organization, um,
Mhm.
by empowering them to do things like data mesh and decentralized approaches, so that we can get more value from the data faster. I think that's a great change in terminology that, yeah, we'll have to keep saying that on things like this podcast, to change the thinking out there about that. But that's why we have people like you on the show, and that thought leadership, and you picked up on that. And I think that's an awesome, um, awesome way to reframe what we've been
I,
doing
I,
and what
I have
way we've
I
been
have to
thinking about it.
say, I mean, even just trying that out in some of my own clients, I mean, the thing that struck me wasn't what IT thought about it. It was what business people thought about it.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
and that that change of wording was just a complete perception that that IT is all of a sudden here to help us. It's
Yeah.
it's like it's not like it's them and us. It's just they're just trying to help us, and I think there's that's nothing technical or anything. It's just a human perception thing, but it makes a difference. I think it makes a difference.
Yeah,
It puts it
I
puts it in a different light. And I think the more, let's face it, the more we can shorten the time to value, lower the cost of doing this, and make it more rapid to be able to seize opportunities by bringing in new data and combining it with what we already have, what we already know, to be able to produce new insights and act on it. It's going to help everybody in the organization. And so the whole point of data ops is to be able to try and make that happen. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I was just going to say that. I mean, that really is the whole reason for the true data ops philosophy and the 7 pillars is to try to achieve all those goals. And I think you point out, the thing that we need to remember is it isn't just technology. It is people, and it has to be the people first. If the people don't see value in it
Yeah.
and don't want to be part of the program, just like trying to get product owners in the business back in as we were doing agile, they've got to see how they fit into this picture, and it has to make sense to them. Just because it makes sense to technical people like us doesn't mean it's going to make sense to the business people, and we've got to bridge that gap in order to be successful and really
Yeah.
build modern data driven companies.
I agree, and I think it's a case of also not assuming that these folks they'll just pick it up. It's okay. No, they won't. I mean,
No.
I think what has to happen is we've got to go out there and teach these people these practices until it becomes a habit. And then they're in. Then you've done your job. They're part of it. But there's a lot of people can't get out of the starting blocks because a couple of pennies haven't dropped in their head somewhere, and so I think there's an obligation here from an educational perspective for best practices, taking complexity away, giving people as much reusable stuff as we can give them, and implementing standards where it makes sense. I mean, so that in the long run what you've got is a well-oiled machine, rather than we if you remember back to the sort of 2013 2014 era, self-service data prep emerged, and it was just wild west. I mean, people
Yeah.
grabbing data all over the place. Nobody had any kind of clue, how anything was being produced necessarily. It doesn't mean there's no need for something like self-service data prep. It's just that we just kind of handed out technology and said, you figure it out. And I think that's what we have to avoid, and that's what DataOps is trying to avoid this time around.
Yeah, I agree. So, well, we're pretty much out of time here, Mike. But the last question that I want to ask, that I ask all my guests: if you weren't doing data and technology, what would you do? So, as you start thinking towards, maybe stepping away at some day, uh, what would you do? Where's your interest outside of the data world?
Oh, wow. I've got a number. I've got, of course, have to say I'm an ardent Manchester United fan, despite the fact that we're not top of the league right now. So I'd be spending more time, I think, watching games. Um, but no, I mean, for me, I got a number of, let's say, hobbies. I'm trying to get into sailing right now. So I'm
Ah,
hoping to, just in the process of joining a yacht club. Near where my holiday apartment is, and then hopefully I'll be able to get more engaged in that. And I certainly found out the right way to get into that is when you join the yacht club, you find out some people are looking for crew members, and so I might feel my way in that way. I mean, who knows? Probably end up with a boat at some point, um, but yeah, I'm certainly gonna keep doing that, and yeah, apart from that, just well, try and pick up the guitar again. I think. I mean, I haven't done a great job of it through my working career. It was kind of great at the beginning of it, but lost it all in the middle, and so maybe I should try and get it back again at the back
Well,
end of
yeah.
my
Well, yeah. And if you get a boat, then you might want to be out on your boat singing some sea chanties there, right?
Well, there you go. There you
I
go.
did. I did a snorkel cruise in Hawaii one time, and on a whaling schooner, and the captain of the boat had his guitar, and while we were out there, he was singing some old classic sea shanties there for us. So that was, and my wife loved that. So interesting. That's one of the things that's kind of on our list too, is to potentially learn to sail. We've enjoyed being on sailboats in the past, and maybe we'll get out there and learn how to do it as well. Well,
Sounds good.
yeah. Thanks for coming on today, Mike. This has been
Thank you.
fantastic.
Thank
Getting
you.
to catch up with you and get your thoughts on what we're doing, and we're going to latch on to that center of enablement phrase. So hopefully everyone who's listening will start thinking about that as well. Thanks to everybody who's out there joining us, who joined us live or might be listening to the recording of this podcast. Be sure to check out our podcast next week. My guests are going to be board advisors, thought leaders, and educators, Randy Bean and Allison Sawgraves. I'm sure it's going to be a very interesting chat with them. So we'll look forward to seeing you then. And in the meantime, have a great rest of the week. And, keep listening in and telling your friends about the True Data Ops podcast.